Testing. How I did it is like very exaggerated.
Here to God damn it. Here to share the wild. Hold on.
I had to re-record so many times because I kept fucking it up.
Okay, well, can we do it?
Yeah, go for it. It's recording.
Oh, hey. This is That's Wild, the podcast. We're Lauren and Jen, two best friends of over a decade and your girlies behind the mic, here to share the wildest stories history has to offer.
Picture an adult bedtime story. Expect crazy twists, questionable humor, plenty of sass, and likely some choice expletives. We're diving into history with a bit of chaos and a whole lot of fun.
Was that better?
I liked that.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay, I love you. Bye.
Oh,
Hi, bestie.
hi. How's it going?
Miss you.
I miss you so much.
I can't believe that you had to ask me if I was going to come to Buffalo if the Bills went to the Super Bowl, because that's just without question. I will walk there and risk my life via hitchhiking if I must.
I know.
But the Bills, don't judge me for this, what I'm about to say. I genuinely don't know if I can watch them against the Chiefs because I'll be so anxious.
You have to watch them.
Then I'm just going to take a shot for every time something goes wrong. So that way, if it's really bad, I'm just drunk.
I don't want to watch it like with anyone. I want to watch it by myself.
I think I'm going to just watch it from my phone if I can find a way to stream it and then tune everything else out.
What have you been doing this season for the games?
Well, as of recently, please don't take it away from me. I'll cry. But when you visited me, you signed into YouTube TV and it's still logged in. And I'm like in heaven.
Wait, we get kicked off. Of it.
Well, then kick us out.
Watching.
But I'm like, I don't know who she shares this with. I'm like, they're going to figure it out one day. But your YouTube TV, it's only been a few weeks, but it has been our savior.
Really?
And Tanner, yeah. And I'm like, I feel.
Wait, what are you rocking with without it? What do you have?
I have to. Well, okay. So in Eastern New York, you have to either go to a bar.
You're not in the area where they can see it.
For people who might not understand this, I don't understand
the local.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like that for the playoff games, right?
Well, now that I have YouTube TV, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Web family. I don't know, but
thanks, Jim Webb, actually.
Because so it is a few people on it. Because I know that they have you can do 11 accounts or something. My friends have it, and I considered being like, throw me on.
I think we get kicked off sometimes if too many people are watching a stream.
That's a thing.
Sometimes, yeah, but I don't. It hasn't happened recently, so I'll keep your secret.
Thanks. I hope Jim Webb doesn't listen to this podcast.
You have until the air date of this when Casey and James also listen to it.
They're gonna be like, "What the fuck, guys?" One of my friends who I love, shout out Maddie, because she was one of our first listeners. For a while, she was mooching off of my Hulu, and I just put her in as Mad Money, and my dad was like, "Who the fuck is Mad Money?" Don't worry about it.
We have what's really funny is we have Disney Plus too, and there's a bunch of people on our Disney Plus, and my kids went through and what's that movie, Inside Out, where it has all of the emotions.
Yes.
They went through and they were like, oh, by the way, we labeled everyone by the emotion that they are most struggling with.
Who got the depressive one?
Roasted my whole family and everyone that's on our Disney Plus.
Your kids are diabolical.
I know. It was like, what one did I get? I think the bored one. That's like, I know.
Were you like, girls are fucking grounded?
I was like, I could be anxiety or sadness. So,
that makes me really sad for you.
You win some, you lose some.
I would definitely be anxiety if anyone at all. We have a group chat. I hope I can say this. We call our Lexapro, which is anxiety medication, Sexy Lexi.
Oh, our group chat?
Our group chat.
Oh my god, yeah.
Should we tell people
pharmaceuticals?
Should we tell people what our group chat is and how long it took everyone in the group chat to realize what it meant.
Yeah, sister wives.
Yeah. And
but we're not
polygamous. And not
Wait, who thought it was polygamy? Wait, it is polygamy.
No, it is polygamy.
It?
But Haley just thought it meant we're all sisters and we're all wives. Wait, no, that's not it. But I was like, Haley, it's polyamorous. And we're not shitting on people who do that, but like polyamory,
it's
right?
Just not the way we roll.
No, but our group chat is Sister Wives Heart.
Oh, I love that chat.
I do too.
It's a
highly
great
recommend
chat.
Doing what we do with our girlfriends. We do Waffle Wednesdays, and we learned this from TikTok. Shout out TikTok because you're back.
My God, our last episode we were like lamenting the loss of TikTok,
and it was gone for a little.
I was so freaking sad for 10 hours.
I honestly, I didn't have doubts, but Waffle Wednesdays, you basically just send little video clips of your updates for the week to your friends, and everyone sends one, and then you watch them, and it's like, oh, I just got a little snippet of my friend's life and what they're doing, and it's just
a perfect way to stay in touch.
Yeah. So if you're bad at communicating with people,
highly recommend
do that.
Highly recommend a good waffle. We are actually recording this on Waffle Wednesday. Did you send one? You sent one at the crack of dawn.
First, because I was like, I said such a shitty update last week. I had to not reimburse myself. What's the word? I had to do better this week. And I was like, I have so many updates about my ailments because I'm fucking geriatric.
You've been ill.
Yeah. Jenn had the plague, i.e. strep, go through her house, and I was like riding high because I was like, I didn't get sick. And then Karma's a bitch, and Karma is a delayed sickness because I got so sick this weekend. I was at my friend Alex's house, and it was like 7:00, and we normally hang out there till midnight later. Well, not later. Yeah. I'm fucking tired, but it was 7:00, and I was like, I don't feel good. I gotta go. And then by midnight, I had a fucking fever.
I feel like the stomach bug is I would much rather have strep than have the stomach bug.
Like 100%. 100%.
Pukes are the worst.
That's a good segue into how we're starting this episode, because we're gonna do would you rather questions just to get the ball rolling.
Yay.
Okay. We only have a few. We just thought this would be funny. So, and it ranges from raunchy to stupid.
I feel like usually I feel very strongly about would you rathers. Like I can usually identify one right away.
Defend it, I think, to the death. Even if somebody like gives you a valid point opposing your thoughts, you'll fucking.
That's just because I'm an argumentative person.
This is valid. Okay. Would you rather be forced to give up your phone for a month or give up showering for a month? And there's no exceptions.
Can I go in the water?
There's no exceptions. No exceptions. Well,
that's not a shower. So
no liquid can touch your body.
No liquid?
I mean, you can't do like the sponge, the washcloth.
Okay, so do I have to? Can I use like a landline? Can I use a landline? Can I call like my kids at the school?
I searched these, and this one says no exceptions. So I am gonna stand with no landline and no watery substance touching your body.
Okay, but James has his phone. So like if there's a freaking emergency at the school and it blows up, they can call him.
Yeah.
Okay, then I pick no phone.
Really? Oh man. I mean,
are you going no shower?
I'd be stanky after a few days, but remember on Labor Day weekend when Gordy fucking he'll deny this happened, put my phone in a melted ice water cooler. I was like, oh, I don't know what happened.
You were so mad.
I was so mad because I volunteered the music, and I was like, okay, we're going on a raft and floating in water, so like, throw me a bone here. I was without a phone for a few hours, and it was the apocalypse. So I think I'm gonna say no showering.
You know our friend Audrey?
Yes.
She lost her phone. She got her phone stolen in Mexico.
Oh,
and went the rest of the trip in Mexico without a phone. I was like, I don't think I would survive it.
I think I would overnight one somehow if you can. I'd
go to like a freaking store and go get one.
Or I'd get anytime you go out of the country, you can get the little pay-as-you-go phones.
Yeah. Like at the very least.
Okay, next question.
Okay,
Shout out, Audrey. It's good for you.
Yeah, right?
Would you rather get stuck in a room with your ex and a bottle of tequila or have to send a sexy text to your mom by mistake knowing she's going to reply?
Is it like a roulette of exes? Or do you get to pick the ex?
If you're listening to this, my eyes are rolling. If you're watching this, you saw my eyes roll. Wait, what was your question?
This is a good question. Do you get to pick which ex it's going to be? Or is it just like a roulette?
Damn, maybe we should have the last exes. I'm just kidding. Okay, it's a roulette. So it could be any of your exes.
Okay, who am I kidding? I would do the ex and the tequila. I don't want to... I feel like I would... So I didn't have a really bad...
You're not obligated to drink the bottle of tequila. You just...
Can I smash it over the ex's head?
You want to take the violent route, by all means.
Okay. I'm going ex and tequila.
Okay. I would sexy text my mom. She would be like, "Are you practicing what you're gonna say to Tanner this evening?" I don't know. She would be like, "What's that, honey?"
What is that? Hey, Laura. You should send it.
Yeah, that would be Leslie.
She would be supportive.
For sure. And then she would laugh at me being like, "Wrong person." No. Just kidding. I don't think my mom's ever called anyone a hoe. Okay.
What's the next one?
So random. Would you rather eat ice cream with ketchup or a banana with ketchup?
Ice cream with ketchup.
Same.
I feel like bananas, they're already like, I like them, but they're not my favorite. But
they're already one of those things
with ice cream.
Yeah, you have to be in the mood for it. And like banana, and they're mushy. So just combining two substances that are like,
and like salty sweet is a thing. So like salty ketchup with sweet ice cream.
There's some diehard ketchup people out there who I feel like will just be like both.
Shout out to Kristen Hooper who puts ketchup on her pasta.
Oh,
I know. Isn't that disgusting?
It took me until age last year to come around to ketchup on eggs.
Oh, I love ketchup on eggs. Or hot sauce.
I can do hot sauce any day of the week.
Yeah.
But, okay, this one's funny. Would you rather orgasm loudly every time you cough or every time you sneeze?
Sneeze.
Really?
I think I cough more than I sneeze.
I was going to say, I think I can control my coughs more than I can control a sneeze.
I feel the opposite. I feel like, have you ever done the light trick where you like stare at a light?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Not for you. For me, it does.
Every time I'm about to sneeze, Tanner will be like, "Look at the light."
Wait.
Like,
can you only do it then? Or is it you just have to do it then?
I hope not.
Because you could just cough all day long if you want.
Put yourself in a room, shut the door. I say cough, but ask me on a different day and that could change. Would you rather have your parents see every text you've ever sent or have every single embarrassing moment you've had played on a giant screen at your wedding?
Every single... both my parents? Or... I would rather have my mom see everything I've ever said.
Really?
I think so.
On my mic.
Every embarrassing moment. Everyone. But it's not just it's not just Tanner that's gonna see.
It's everyone.
It's everyone.
Whereas your parents are confined to one person seeing every text.
If you've ever had an embarrassing thing happen during sex, that means that all like 150 wedding guests would see you having embarrassing sex moments.
Oh my God. Your head would go there. Okay, I'm leaning towards my dad would keel over and die.
Lauren, you know our most embarrassing story.
I'm not sharing that.
I know. We're
maybe
not
on our wine night.
Share it, but would you want that to be played to a screen of like 200 people?
Okay, confirmed. My parents can see every text I've ever sent. Because that would be horrifying.
I don't think that's even the worst thing.
That has happened to you?
Yeah.
When people ask me my most embarrassing moment, I tell them that story.
Yeah, that's really funny. It's actually, I think it's in the running for like the most funny, embarrassing story.
I mean, I die laughing when I tell it, but it's, again, to close friends who probably are judging me for it. If I was listening to us right now, I'd be so fucking mad we didn't share.
Stay tuned for next week for when we share with them.
I can think of the person who saw it happen and called us out.
Yeah, I wonder if they ever listen to this, if they'll realize exactly what we're talking about. Okay, what's the next one?
Okay, this is the final one. Mm-hmm. This is a good one because if you've been listening, would you rather get stuck in the Sierra Nevada mountain range in the dead of winter for 3 months or be a sex slave in a cult for 3 years?
Oh. Do you have an answer?
I think cults, because
I feel like cult.
I hate the cold so much.
It's okay, so it's I think like 8 degrees or something here, and I've been paying attention. I work outside. I work in a barn. I work in a stable, so I kind of work outside.
When I think of you, I cry.
I've been paying attention. Like every time I'm cold, I'm like,
would I do this?
Imagine you were in the mountains in 20 feet of snow for 5 months in this. And I was thinking about this the other day. I would rather, the quintessential, like, would you rather freeze to death or burn to death?
Mm-hmm.
Burn.
It happens quickly. Sure. I think it's 8 seconds before all your nerve endings die. I don't know why I know that statistic.
It's got to be so quick, and like, freezing would be terrible.
Fucking painful.
Okay, well, I'm in pain when I'm wearing like freaking Columbia like jackets and freaking nice gloves and stuff, and in a structured barn with hot hands in my pocket, and I'm in pain then. So it must be terrible to freeze to death.
I really want to just be a fly on your brain when you're thinking these thoughts while you're working, because you must just be contemplating life and death, it sounds like.
I get very bored, and all of my coworkers are 4-legged horses, so. As opposed to a 3-legged horse.
I wonder how they would answer these questions. They'd be like, nay, banana, ketchup. I'm sorry.
I'll ask them next time.
Do you talk to them?
Yeah. Because they're like, I don't know, when I'm like moving around them, they're skittish if you're like trying to sneak up. They're prey animals. So I try to
announce your presence.
Yeah. Nice. And I'm bored and I talk a lot. So my favorite one is Rip, is his name.
Aw, you should get him to listen to the podcast.
I should just play it out loud.
Yeah, they'll think you're talking to him. It's your voice.
I know.
Do you want to tell me what your story is tonight? I'm so excited.
Okay, so our story tonight, I'm so excited to tell this. I actually considered texting you and like moving up our recording because I love this story so much, which is actually kind of crazy because it's a sad story-ish. But first of all, it's local to me. Where this occurred was like, it's like a 10-minute drive, honestly, from my house.
This is so wild because my story last week, it was taking place 15 minutes from me. So this is...
I know. So I have like a personal attachment to it, and I did so much research, and I feel like I like know these people. I've looked into the situation so much. So today I am going to be telling you about the Love Canal. And Love Canal is one of the worst environmental disasters in America's history. And it occurred right in my backyard. Not my actual backyard, thank God. But
nearly, basically, almost.
Yeah. And it's crazy because it was so high profile in the 70s when it occurred. But I didn't really know much about it. Like I knew very like loosely the story, but even you in Buffalo, I mean, you went to school in Buffalo, and you said you didn't really know about Love Canal, right?
I had heard the term, and I think I initially thought it was something about swingers, and I was mistaken.
Yeah. Unfortunately, no swingers that I'm aware of in this story, but a very interesting one nonetheless. Basically,
Are you starting?
there are
Okay.
a lot of really shitty things that happened to the community where this happened, but there are lots of protagonists and heroes of the story. And I laughed, I cried, I felt for the community while I was studying this, and it was just such a touching story, so I hope I can do it some justice. So
I know it's not, is it similar kind of idea of what happened with Karen Brockovich, or am I way off base?
Yeah, it's similar. I don't really remember. I've seen that movie, but I don't remember exactly
I think that was
what it was.
based on a true story. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
I think that she commented on this. I don't know. But yeah, if you're ready, we'll buckle up and get right into it. Okay, it's story time. In the mid-1900s, Niagara Falls, New York was a bustling city with a dual identity. On one hand, it was known as the honeymoon capital of the world, drawing tourists in droves to see breathtaking waterfalls. But beyond its appeal as a romantic getaway, the city was also a desirable place to raise a family. The LaSalle neighborhood, right around the corner from me, in particular, was filled with modest starter homes perfect for middle-class families. It was a close-knit community with tree-lined streets and schools and parks where children could play. Industrial factories were a driving force in the economy, providing steady jobs and contributing to the area's prosperity. Yet, underneath this picturesque surface, an environmental nightmare was brewing in an area that would later become known as the infamous Love Canal. Imagine a turn-of-the-century dreamer named William T. Love. Born in Pennsylvania in the mid-1800s, Love was an ambitious entrepreneur with a grand vision. He believed in the promise of renewable energy and set his sights on Niagara Falls as the perfect place to build his utopian model city. Which, fun fact, there's literally on a map of the town that I live in, there's a section that we call Model City, which is where this was supposed to be.
Really?
Yeah, isn't that wild? Love's plan was nothing short of revolutionary. He envisioned a self-sufficient community powered by hydroelectric energy generated from a massive canal. This canal would bypass the falls, using the river's natural flow to produce cheap and abundant electricity. Factories, homes, and public facilities would thrive, all while benefiting from this clean energy source. Construction on the canal began in the 1890s. The dimensions of the canal were impressive. It was designed to be about 60 feet wide and 12 feet deep. However, Love's dream was ultimately ahead of its time. Advances in technology meant that power could now be transmitted over longer distances without needing a local water source. Coupled with an unfortunate economic downturn and a lack of funding, Love's ambitious project came to a screeching halt, and by 1910 the project was abandoned, leaving behind a mile of a partially dug canal, a scar in the landscape that would later become the site of unthinkable tragedy. So basically, he was kind of a con man, actually. He would come into town and he would roll out these plans for some beautiful, model neighborhood, and actually secured funding from the state for this project, and it just bit off way more than he could chew and ran out of juice, and
took the money with him.
Took the money and ran. And this was his MO, but he left behind just literally a mile of canal, and it was just in the middle of nowhere. And kids would come and they would swim in the canal and they would play around it, but ultimately it sat kind of empty.
I didn't realize it was his namesake. I didn't realize where Love came from.
Yep, I always thought It was
This
something.
is why I
Yeah,
thought it was a swinger story.
I know. I know. But no, Love is after William T. Love, the
Got it.
constructor of the canal. Now, let's fast forward to the 1940s. The abandoned Love Canal site caught the attention of Hooker Chemical, a company founded in 1903 that had become one of the key players in the booming chemical industry. Initially, the company focused on making components for cleaning agents, plastics, and other industrial products. But by the mid-20th century, Hooker Chemical had expanded its operations significantly, becoming a major supplier for both domestic and wartime industries. During World War II, the demand for chemicals skyrocketed as the United States ramped up manufacturing for the war effort. Hooker Chemical became integral to this push, producing vast quantities of materials used in everything from synthetic rubber to military equipment. But with all of this increased production came the growing problem of how to dispose of the industrial waste, a problem for which Hooker found a convenient solution in Love's empty canal.
I cannot believe that the names in the story are Hooker and Love. I'm just going to state the irony there.
I know, right? It's serendipitous, really. From 1942 to 1953, Hooker Chemical used the abandoned canal as a dumping ground, burying over 100,000 metal drums filled with approximately 21,000 tons of hazardous chemical waste. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was part of a much larger trend in the chemical industry at the time, where companies often chose convenience over safety when it came to waste disposal. But this decision would come back and haunt the residents of Niagara Falls. It's so scummy how they just haphazardly threw all these chemicals in a ditch and just covered it up, and we're like, yeah, whatever.
I think it was full hazardly.
I know.
Full
I
hazard.
know. Full hazardly.
Sorry, this isn't a joke.
No, it's not a joke, but it's like these people were freaking assholes.
Scumbags.
They knew what they were producing, you know. If you're producing all that crazy shit, you probably shouldn't put it in the ground.
No.
At least, seems like that would have been plain to see in the 50s, but you never know. So, in 1953, Hooker Chemical sold the Love Canal site to the Niagara Falls City School District for just $1. The district had a growing population of students and was looking to expand by building a new school in the up-and-coming neighborhood. The company included a subtle warning about the buried chemicals, but were careful to absolve themselves of any future liability. Hooker's lawyer was quoted saying, "The more we thought about it, the more interested we became in the proposition, and finally came to the conclusion that the Love Canal property was quickly becoming a liability because of the new housing projects in the area. A school, however, could be built in the center section with the chemicals underground. We became convinced that it would be a wise move to turn this property over to the schools, provided we could not be held responsible for future claims or damages resulting from the underground dumping of chemicals." Lawyers, typical assholes, right? Construction soon began on the 99th Street School, right on top of the canal's unfilled section. Workers quickly realized that Hooker Chemical had failed to disclose the full extent of the chemical waste buried beneath. They reportedly encountered chemical drums and strange, foul-smelling substances, but continued with the project nonetheless. Soon, homes were popping up around the site, and Love Canal became a thriving residential neighborhood. Families loved the sense of community that it brought and was generally regarded as a wonderful place to live. Kids spent their days riding bikes and playing in nearby streams and exploring what they affectionately called the Black Lagoon. The Black Lagoon was an exposed part of the canal that occasionally filled with sticky black goo.
Wait, kids were going in that?
Playing in it, yes.
Oh,
playing in it.
Babies.
While this unusual feature was a source of fun for the children, it hinted at the dangers below the ground. Love Canal was a picturesque community on the surface, but beneath it lay a toxic time bomb. I was watching a documentary on this, another PBS one, and these people were recalling how they saw all of these like weird rocks, which I'll get into in a minute, but all of this goo, and they were just like playing in it. One girl said that her friend was like walking on the school grounds and fell through like a rusted barrel had come to the surface and rusted through, and so the ground collapsed and she fell legitimately into one of the toxic barrels.
Is she okay?
I mean, there was a lot of people who were not okay. I don't know about that specific person, but it's just like this stuff was literally right under the soil. Where school was. An elementary school.
Is the school still there?
No. But
okay.
You'll learn about that.
Okay.
I don't want to get ahead of myself. In the 1970s.
Also, you're geriatric for watching PBS. That kills me.
Are you kidding me? You didn't used to watch like Arthur or Sesame Street?
I guess this is your second resource of PBS, and I just think it's hilarious.
I love PBS, and you should love it too. Support your local public broadcast. What is it? PBS? Public Broadcasting System? Is that it?
Girl, you think I know this?
I'm going to make it my campaign to make you watch more PBS.
What was the dog? Like the beagle? I watched that dog.
Oh, Wishbone?
Wishbone.
Was that a PBS show?
Maybe not. I don't know.
He wasn't a beagle. He was a Jack Russell. Because I remember I wanted one.
I watched Wishbone.
Wishbone. What was the intro song? It's Wishbone. I don't know. I don't remember. Anyways.
Sorry. Continue.
In the 1970s, the first signs of trouble began to emerge. Residents started noticing foul odors, strange substances seeping into their basements, and alarming health problems. Children came home from playing with rashes and burns. They often recalled playing with what they called fire rocks, chunks of material that they found scattered around the area that would spontaneously combust when exposed to air. Others came home with the soles of their shoes seemingly melted from walking on the ground.
So like it was pop rocks, but with poison.
Yeah. And they would literally burst into flames, just on the school ground. It was clear that something was wrong. Then things took an even darker turn. At the school playground, where children were drawing with soft white rocks found nearby, they developed severe eye problems. A girl temporarily went blind and was rushed to the hospital, while 2 boys experienced severe burns in and around their eyes. Those white rocks were later identified as chunks of a pesticide called benzene hexafluoride, or BHC. Only days after that, I'm sorry, I heard a sound from you. A sympathetic sound.
I squealed a little, and I didn't mean to. That's horrible. I mean,
it's crazy. Can you imagine just like chunks of a pesticide on the ground?
No.
I don't even like pesticides. I couldn't imagine. Like, I don't even like when my food was grown in pesticides, let alone just a chunk of it chilling on a playground. Only days after that, a metal drum surfaced near the playground, oozing a rust-colored substance. A Hooker Chemical safety advisor was called to investigate, collecting samples and interviewing witnesses. But despite these alarming incidents, officials failed to warn the community of the potential risks, leaving residents increasingly anxious and in the dark about their environment. If you're a local Buffalo resident, you'll remember this, but the situation came to a head during the brutal winter of 1977, known as one of the worst blizzards in the area's history, which is saying something, because, Buffalo.
There's been many.
Lake effect storms. The storm dumped massive amounts of snow on Niagara Falls, paralyzing the city and causing widespread flooding as it began to melt. The rising water table forced the buried chemicals to surface, further contaminating homes, yards, and even the school grounds. Pungent odors filled the air, and strange substances continued to ooze into basements, making it clear that the dangers of Love Canal could no longer be ignored. Had you heard of the blizzard of 1977?
Yeah, but I didn't know the tie of Love Canal to it.
I know, but people
died.
People always talk about it still. And they're like, that blizzard of 1977. Oh, this is nothing like the blizzard of 1977.
Yes. I like to think that's how every single Buffalo resident talks. Oh, nothing like that.
Back in the blizzard of 1977.
Buffalo's they just can't get a break sometimes. We're
rooting for you. I know. This was when Lois Gibbs, a 26-year-old housewife and mother, emerged as an unlikely hero. Lois had moved to the Love Canal neighborhood thinking it would be the perfect place to raise her 2 children. But when her 5-year-old son, Michael, developed asthma, persistent infections, and later seizures, Lois began to suspect that something much bigger was at play. Convinced that the chemicals at the 99th Street School were to blame, Lois requested that Michael was transferred to another school. The superintendent flat out refused, arguing that there was no concrete evidence linking the school to health issues. Frustrated and determined, Lois took matters into her own hands. She began...
Lois.
Yeah, hell yeah. She's like the hero of this entire story. She's awesome. She began speaking with neighbors and quickly realized that many families were experiencing similar issues. Gathering stories and signatures, she started a petition demanding that local officials take action. What began as a mother's fight for her child's health soon evolved into a full-blown grassroots movement. Lois's leadership helped unite the neighborhood, and soon the mothers and housewives of the Love Canal were at the forefront of the fight for environmental justice. They organized protests, attended community meetings, and persistently contacted the media and their local political representatives. These so-called housewives became the #1 advocates for change, refusing to be ignored by authorities or corporate interests. Realizing the scale...
Housewives. Don't
I know.
With housewives.
Don't fuck with moms, honestly.
That's good shirts that say that. Don't fuck with moms.
Yeah, that could be our first merch. Don't fuck with moms. Realizing the scale of the battle they were in, they established the Love Canal Homeowners Association. Lois Gibbs was voted in as president, a testament to her leadership and efforts to bring the community together in their fight. Under her guidance, the group began to organize and demand accountability. Before the newspapers had actually caught on, the community voices were growing louder and looking for someone to help tell their story. Michael Brown, a reporter for the Niagara Gazette, became the first in the media aware of the Love Canal issues when he attended a community meeting where residents were voicing their concerns. At the meeting, he met Lois Gibbs, who urged him to look into the problems in her neighborhood and shared her suspicions about the health issues linked to the chemical contamination. Intrigued, Brown began investigating. He conducted interviews with residents and researched the area's history, and uncovered troubling details about hooker chemicals' past activities. His persistence and dedication to uncovering the truth helped bring the story to light, earning him the trust of the community and putting national focus on Love Canal. Brown's reporting was vital in uncovering the contamination and giving a voice to residents demanding action from local officials. So Michael Brown was like the first person to break the story. And he was just like a regular reporter, and he was just like on his like local beat, and he described what?
And by chance came across this, it sounds like.
Yeah. So from what I understand, it was his job to go to like all the local community meetings about this proposal or that thing. And there was a proposal, a community meeting about a new dump that was going to be built closer to like where I live. Mm-hmm. And Lois Gibbs showed up to that meeting and got on the mic and was like, do not let them build this. Do not let them do this here, because they completely destroyed my neighborhood. And Michael Brown was like, I was in the back and it was a late meeting and I was falling asleep, and I heard her get up and speak and my eyes opened. And he was like, I immediately took notice of what was happening and felt that there had to be like something to this. And because Lois was like, because Lois was like so passionate about it.
Oh,
and
man.
Yeah, and talked to her and started to like uncover the truth. And he was the first. The media plays a huge role in this because they're the ones. The media wants sensational headlines, and the Homeowners Association was kind of like a symbiotic relationship, because the Homeowners Association wanted the spotlight. They would not let people forget about them. Yeah. So by Michael Brown breaking this story, it really gave them the traction that they needed to put pressure on like politicians to help them
do something,
and the state of New York. So by now, the New York State Department of Health had gotten wind of the issues at Love Canal and began testing the site to determine the extent of the problem. As they dug deeper, they reached out to Hooker Chemical for answers about what exactly was buried in the dump. However, Hooker Chemical was unwilling to disclose the contents of the site, leaving the state officials frustrated and the community increasingly desperate for transparency. See, Hooker Chemical was one of the largest taxpayers for the city of Niagara Falls.
Figures.
And it was often said that the smell of chemicals was the smell of money. Local politicians were reluctant to rock the boat with such a driving economic force, but it had finally become a problem that was too big to ignore. What they found was troubling. Tests revealed the presence of over 200 chemicals, many of which were known carcinogens or highly toxic compounds.
All in the ground?
In the ground, in the Love Canal
over
site.
200.
Over 200 chemicals.
Oh my God.
Among the most toxic substances discovered were benzene, chloroform, toluene, and dioxins. Benzene, a byproduct of paint thinners, plastic manufacturing, and a gasoline additive, among other things, was found in the air near the school at concentrations over 300 times the safe exposure level. But perhaps the most concerning was the presence of dioxins, compounds related to Agent Orange, a defoliant used during the Vietnam War. It is one of the most toxic and dangerous chemicals ever made by man. Exposure to these chemicals can cause cancer, seizures, liver and kidney diseases, miscarriages, and severe birth defects. The residents would later find out that Hooker had dumped more dioxins in the ground at Love Canal than the entirety of what was used in the Vietnam War.
What?
I know.
I have chills, like gross chills. This is a small interjection. My dad often talks about some of his buddies who suffered from Agent Orange from Vietnam War, and it was just like a slow, so sad, painful decline. And this is, that makes me so sad.
That was one of the most standout statistics of the entire story to me.
That's crazy.
More than what they use. And it's infamous. You hear about Agent Orange and the Vietnam War all the time and how it caused so many health problems. And more of that was dumped at Love Canal, where kids are just, then they build a school right on top of it. It was like shocking. It was shocking to hear that.
Yeah, they knew. I mean, obviously.
I know. These chemicals didn't stay buried. Once the water table rose and the containment methods failed. A little bit about the containment methods. So they were in these drums, right? These metal drums. They were concerned when they were dumping the drums into the canal that they would pressurize and explode. So instead of, figuring out something else, they drilled holes in the barrels.
So they wouldn't pressurize or whatever.
So they wouldn't explode. So they're just clearly leaking out underground.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I know. Tests show that the residents suffered from an alarming array of health problems. Chronic illnesses, neurological disorders, miscarriages, and a striking increase in birth defects. In August of 1978, the health department declared a public health emergency. They ordered the closure of the 99th Street School and recommended the immediate relocation of families with children under the age of 2 or pregnant women living within 2 blocks of the dump site. The announcement marked a turning point in the crisis as it confirmed the severe risks posed by the buried chemicals and amplified calls for action to protect residents.
So these people had to leave their homes?
Oh, yeah. They were fighting to leave their homes.
Oh my God. And these poor pregnant women.
I know. Could you imagine? Pregnancy is already stressful enough. There's videos of these community meetings where they would announce this stuff, and there would legitimately be women standing up with big pregnant bellies being like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to help me? What are you going to do to help my unborn baby right now? Yeah. I have a 3-year-old. You're going to tell me that 2 months ago, when he was, 2 years old, he would have been at risk, but now he's fine? That's what always gets me, is like why the cutoff at 2 years old, you know? And so if you're 2 in one day you're no longer at
You're
risk.
immune.
Yeah.
It's just.
And they described, I get into this in a little bit, but they described this huge chain link fence that they put up around these two inner rings of houses that were the initial people evacuated. And there was people who, like, their front yard faced the fence. So it's maybe 50 feet away from this fence. And they'd be like, okay, so those people needed to be evacuated, but I'm supposedly safe over here. While the residents within the first 2 blocks of Love Canal were being relocated, families living farther away were told that the contamination wasn't affecting them. Governor Hugh Carey decided not to pay for the relocation of anyone beyond the inner 2 rings of homes closest to the canal, giving those farther out a false sense of security. One such family was that of Luella Kenny. Luella and her husband Norman were both scientists and lived in a lovely corner lot home with a large backyard where their 3 children loved to play. Their backyard was special. It was the intersection of 2 creeks which provided endless fun for their kids. In June of 1978, Luella's youngest son, 7-year-old John Allen, started to get sick. At first, doctors thought it was allergies, but soon his symptoms worsened. He became extremely lethargic, and his little body began to swell. Alarmed, Luella brought John Allen to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with a kidney disease called minimal lesion nephrosis. The doctors reassured her that the condition was common in children, and they usually outgrew it, and that John Allen soon entered remission. However, when John Allen returned home, he got sick again. And this began a distressing cycle. John Allen would get sick, be hospitalized, recover, and then relapse shortly after coming home. The doctors were puzzled, and Luella, who was overwhelmed with caring for her sick son and her 2 other children, had no time to pay attention to the media coverage about the chemicals a few blocks away. After all, the health department had told her that her family home was safe, right? In September of 1978, John Allen's condition worsened. He was admitted to the ICU, and one day, while Luella and her husband were in the hospital cafeteria, they heard an emergency page for doctors to rush to John Allen's room. Dropping everything, they ran back to be at his side, only to be met with devastating news. Despite the doctor's best efforts, John Allen had died. In her grief, Luella demanded an autopsy and began channeling her pain into action. As scientists, she and her husband dove into research, combing through medical journals for answers. They discovered that nephrosis could be linked to exposure to chemicals, and in particular, dioxins. This realization spurred Luella to fight, not only for her family, but for all of the other families who had been falsely reassured by the health department. Her journey became one of advocacy, determination, and unwavering pursuit of justice for the community of Love Canal. She was going to make damn sure that what happened to John Allen didn't happen to any other kids in her community.
This makes me so mad because it's one of those stories where it could have been avoided.
Yeah, and it's like so many people had to fail for this to get to this level. And it's just, this had me crying. And I was literally in with the horses listening to this audiobook, crying, ugly crying in the barn.
And Riff was like, what's his name? Riff was
Rip.
Rip was like, Jen, you okay, girl?
What's wrong with this girl? Yeah.
That's so
sad. I know. And I can just like put myself in her shoes that she is just so overwhelmed with like motherhood. They're both working. They're both like respected scientists. And she's taking care of a sick kid. She has 2 other kids, and they're not immediately in the danger zone. And they had loved their community so much. The documentary that I watched showed their home, and it's just like such a little idyllic like space
of cuteness.
Yeah, and it went so wrong, and it was like Hooker Chemical did them wrong by dumping that there in the first place. The city school district did that wrong. They knew did them wrong. They knew there was chemicals there, and they thought, oh fuck it, we'll just build a school.
And the governor who like whatever drew the line with the inner circles, and they were outside of it, or however.
Right, the health department. And that's the thing too, is that they didn't want to pay any more than they needed to, because the people that were being evacuated, they were buying them out of their homes. They, I believe, reimbursed like moving costs for some of the residents, and it was a very expensive venture. They knew they would have to remediate the site, but it was just unclear where the money was going to come from, and there was just a ton of squabbling over who was going to pay it. And families like this suffered because John Allen got better. He was in the hospital and he would get better. And if he hadn't kept returning back to the toxic site, and if he had gotten out earlier, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah,
you know?
If they had relocated,
they
said he could have been in remission.
This was a year after they had started raising alarm bells at this point. Like, it really did. It got so much worse because the water pushed all of these chemicals higher up and, more like accessible, I guess.
And his other siblings were okay.
Yeah. I mean, there were other kids in the community. People were telling their stories about they had kids that were born with like deformations and, like special needs, and so many miscarriages and birth defects. That was like one of the things that really stood out. Just a sad situation overall. This
is very similar to a lot of what happened in Erin Brockovich. It's just chemicals that are poisoning human bodies, especially pregnant women. That's awful.
Right. But the thing is that while it's such a sad story, what I'm going to get into next is like why I was so excited to tell you, because while it was such a tragedy in some ways, it really shows the heart of the community, and that you really, I wish I could show you my notes before I was, writing this all out. You would laugh. They were literally like, don't fuck with moms. Like, moral of the story, don't fuck with a mom. Like, they will always do as much as they can to, fight for their children.
Buffalo is the city of good neighbors.
Yeah, and so much of this was happening. Like, they purposely, like the state of New York would like purposely schedule these meetings for like first, early in the morning, or times when
it was inconvenient.
Yeah, it was inconvenient for residents, and often the only people that could go to them were the moms. Moms would bring their kids with them and show up at these community meetings, and I think they were really discounted right from the beginning, and that backfired. Don't fuck with moms. So let's get back into it. The fight for justice at Love Canal was bolstered by the introduction of badass herself, Dr. Beverly Pagan, a scientist from Roswell Park, and anyone from Buffalo will recognize that name. A local government-funded research hospital. Lois Gibbs was spearheading the efforts of the Love Canal Homeowners Association and was introduced to Dr. Pagan through her brother-in-law, who worked with Pagan. Although Dr. Pagan was not a resident of Love Canal, she lived in the city of Buffalo, she volunteered her expertise to assist the homeowners in their struggle for answers. By this time, the first 2 rings of homes closest to the canal dump site had been vacated and surrounded by a tall chain-link fence. However, many families living outside of the fenced area continued to experience severe health problems, despite assurances from authorities that their homes were safe. Dr. Pagan worked closely with the women of the Homeowners Association to conduct an independent study, going door to door to door to conduct a health survey of over 700 homes in the area. They meticulously collected data on illnesses, miscarriages, birth defects, and other health problems that families were experiencing. The women plotted their findings on a map and revealed a startling pattern. The data led to what became known as the swale theory. So I didn't know what a swale was when I was looking into this. So a swale is a low-lying, marshy type area that acts as a natural drainage path for water. The map showed that families living along these swales were experiencing the highest rates of illness. The theory suggested that chemicals from the dump site were leaching into the groundwater and following these swales, spreading contamination far beyond the fenced-off zones. This groundbreaking study not only proved that the contamination was more widespread than the officials admitted, but also gave the residents a powerful tool to push for further action. Dr. Pagan's involvement was instrumental in legitimizing the concerns of the homeowners. Her scientific expertise and the data collected by the women of Love Canal laid the groundwork for broader investigation and amplified the community's demands for justice. Together, they proved that ordinary citizens, armed with determination and data, could challenge corporate and governmental neglect. Dr. Pagan took the findings of her study to Albany to present them to the New York State Health Commissioner. She initially thought that the meeting had gone well, but when she returned home the next day, she discovered that the health department had publicly dismissed the study, and the newspaper's headlines were that it was useless housewife data.
Shut up.
Despite her credentials as a well-respected scientist.
And she was doing this as she was volunteering her time to do this?
Yeah, just out of the kindness of her heart, volunteering.
Yo, fuck those guys.
Yeah, and I didn't really include this, but she's working for Roswell Park, right? And this is a state-funded hospital. So her superiors were very concerned that she was getting involved with Love Canal. Because at this point in time, it's kind of like the residents versus the state of New York, because the residents are begging to get out, and the state health department doesn't want to admit how bad it is, or is kind of turning a blind eye to it, so that they don't have to pay to remediate this whole area. And her superiors at work actually start kind of like harassing her and making her turn in like incredible amounts of paperwork, completely detailing what she's doing. She's not allowed to do any, I mean, naturally she wasn't, but they wanted to know what she was doing like every minute of the day. When she was studying this, she wasn't allowed to study it like on, during like her work hours. She had to submit all of these reports to her superiors on what she was doing, and she ultimately felt like she was being like threatened at work.
Yeah.
And it was
they don't lose their funding.
Right. And it was such a like nasty scenario because she was employed by the state of New York, basically. And it was sad reading that, because growing up in the area, you hear so much about Roswell Park, and it's such a prestigious name that you don't want to think that, I know that none of these people are probably working now, I don't know, but it just was a really ugly situation. And
it's eye-opening.
Right, and she like risked it all to help these families, like moms and homeowners, be taken more seriously. Lois Gibbs summed up their growing frustration by stating that every person fighting to escape the area was a woman, and every person in a position of power was a man. It was very much just a gender struggle to be taken seriously.
Never seen that before.
Right? So much has changed. Lois decided they needed to increase pressure on officials and force them to pay attention. The group made their goal clear. Anyone who wanted to leave should be able to leave, with their homes purchased by the government at fair market value. These were middle-class families who couldn't afford to abandon their most significant asset, their homes. Lois refused to let officials ignore them, seizing every opportunity to speak to the media and keep the issue in the headlines. The women staged protests daily, and arrests were occasionally made. With Governor Hugh Carey up for re-election, they strategically targeted his campaign stops in western New York, and Luella Kenney joined the protests, famously confronting Governor Carey by saying, "Hey, my son is dead, and it's because you guys won't help us. How many more kids are you going to let die?" These encounters created, clearly, bad optics for Carey's campaign.
Good.
The women's protests grew more symbolic and dramatic. They dragged dummies into the streets to represent each child who had died from chemical poisoning in the neighborhood. By now, the Love Canal disaster had become national news, capturing the attention of the entire country as they watched the environmental catastrophe unfold. They were so smart. These women were just so incredibly smart. I honestly, they're heroes. They knew that they had to be sensational in order to continue to have their story be on front page news, and they just ramped it up every time. That wasn't
sad,
working,
but
okay,
good
we'll
for
keep
them.
going. Yeah. And Lois Gibbs said that she got home one night and her husband was like, come on, you know the media is just using you. Like, they're using you for stories and reads. And she was like, yeah, but you know what? We're using them too. And they actually, they were trying to get the attention of the federal government and get them to step in because the state obviously wasn't doing enough. And they dragged dummies of Jimmy Carter and his wife out onto the Homeowners Association front lawn and lit them on fire. Okay. Actually. Yeah, they were pissed. And so. Yeah. Finally, after relentless pressure from the media and the Love Canal Homeowners Association, the federal government could no longer ignore the unfolding crisis. The Environmental Protection Agency stepped in and began conducting its own investigations, connecting two crucial findings that would change the course of the disaster once and for all. First, the EPA conducted a chromosome study on the Love Canal residents. This study examined blood samples from those living in the area and found alarming levels of chromosomal damage, which are often precursors to cancer and other serious diseases. This finding provided irrefutable evidence of the toxic impact of the chemicals on human health.
Is that something that can be reversed?
It's
like chromosomal, however you say it, damage?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Probably not.
I don't think so. And they were outraged when they heard that. That was like from my understanding, that was when hysteria really hit. Secondly, the EPA repeated Beverly Pagan's swale theory study and confirmed her findings. Shocking. The chemicals had indeed leached out of the canal and were traveling through the groundwater, contaminating homes beyond the original evacuation zones. Dioxin, one of the most toxic substances, was discovered in the creek behind the Kenny family home, where John Allen used to play. Families living along these swales were found to have higher rates of cancer, miscarriages, and other health issues. The EPA held a community meeting in Niagara Falls to announce their findings. The meeting was emotionally charged, with parents screaming and demanding answers about risks to their families. Children approached the microphones, asking tearfully if they would be able to grow up. It was a dramatic and heart-wrenching scene, further underscoring the urgency of the crisis. Faced with the mounting evidence and the public outcry, the government declared a federal health emergency. However, the community's fury boiled over. After the heated meeting, Lois Gibbs and an enraged crowd took two EPA officials hostage, demanding action and even telling the White House to watch the hell out, and this is only the beginning.
Oh boy.
The standoff escalated until President Jimmy Carter himself became directly involved. The White House ultimately agreed to relocate all the remaining families and buy their homes at fair market value. Lois Gibbs received a call from the White House confirming the decision, and the community erupted with relief and joy. After years and years of fear and struggles, the residents were finally free to leave Love Canal. As a direct result of the activism led by the housewives of the Love Canal Homeowners Association, the government created the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act of the 1980s, better known today as the Superfund Bill. Have you ever heard of the Superfund Bill?
Yeah. That was from this?
Straight up because of Lois Gibbs and the Homeowners Association. The Superfund Bill established a federal program to clean up toxic waste sites across the United States and hold polluters accountable for the costs. Love Canal became the first site to benefit from the Superfund program, turning the tragedy into a landmark moment for environmental justice. The story of Love Canal didn't end with the relocation of its residents. In the years following the evacuation, the federal government sued Occidental Petroleum, the parent company of Hooker Chemical, for their role in the disaster. Ultimately, Occidental was forced to pay $250 million to reimburse New York State for cleanup costs, with $27 million of that going directly to Love Canal residents. Despite this legal action, Hooker Chemical refused to take accountability to this day, stating that the chemicals buried there were simply a byproduct of modern living, and society sometimes just must bear the burden of its conveniences. Lois Gibbs, however, refused to let the fight end there. She went on to become one of the most prominent environmental activists in the United States, dedicating her life to advocating for communities facing environmental injustices. To this day, she continues to inspire others to stand up against powerful corporations and demand accountability. The true heroes of Love Canal were the everyday mothers and housewives who refused to back down. Their tireless efforts not only led to the evacuation of their neighborhood, but also changed environmental law and activism forever. Because of their work, there are now more than 120 Superfund sites 1,200 Superfund sites identified by the EPA. Yet their story is also a reminder that the fight is far from over. Many more Love Canals remain, and the work to ensure environmental justice continues. Luella Kenny, now an old woman, still lives just a few miles from her former home in Love Canal. Recently, she visited the area and saw something chilling. Over 250 of the old homes have been purchased again by the next generation of families, reassured by the government that the site has been cleaned and is now safe. She watched as a pregnant woman and her toddler walked down the street, laughing together, and Luella couldn't help but wonder if the woman knew what was buried beneath their feet. The legacy of Love Canal serves as both a warning and an inspiration, reminding us all of the power of collective action and the ongoing need to protect our communities and our planet.
I'm gonna cry.
I know!
Oh my god.
I know!
I had no idea.
Isn't that just like such an insane story that no one knows about? I mean, people know about it, but
the woman who fucking fought their asses off.
I know.
Oh my god,
I
you
know.
could bang on this woman's door and be like, "Can I be your friend?"
Literally, there's the videos of them. Mind you, Lois Gibbs was 26 years old during all of this.
Baby.
26 years old. And she does a bunch of interviews and she's like, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. But my kids were getting sick. My son's having seizures. My freaking neighbors are having miscarriages. My friends are having miscarriages. Our babies are being stillborn. Like, she was like, I had to. I just had to. And she was such a natural at it.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, she's just such a fucking cool person. These moms are such badasses. And I mean, Beverly Pagan, who risked her entire career, I mean, being a prestigious scientist, risked her entire career to help these women out. And in this documentary, Michael Brown, the reporter that first broke the story, crying, giving his interview, being like, these residents were suffering so much. And the neighborhood was so beautiful. Like, it was just like a nice, really wholesome community with just no idea about what was underneath their feet.
To your understanding, is it all cleaned up? Like, the people who now live in those homes are going to be okay and their kids are going to be okay?
So when I was just finishing up the book that I read, I drove over there. I drove over to the Love Canal because, I mean, I had always, like, driven by and James would be like, oh, Love Canal's over there. Oh, it's crazy. And you could kind of see. I saved a bunch of pictures for us to, like, post on our Instagram, just so people have a little bit more of a visualization. But they did not. I believe they did remove some chemicals, but the majority of everything that was in that original canal, they poured a clay cap over it to try to just encapsulate it. And they have like wells dug in there where they can test if anything is escaping. Okay. But I mean, to some extent, I can't imagine. There has to be like a buildup. I mean, this was in the water. This was in those swales.
Yeah.
And there actually have been lawsuits about families that moved back into that area and had no idea, had never heard of Love Canal before.
Oh, because it wasn't like advertised to them when they bought their homes?
There's like nothing over there. I drove by to see what the area looks like now. And a couple of the streets, they demolished so many of these homes. And there's no like monument or anything. You would never know. You would never know that anything had happened there. And there's a huge chain link fence around the actual canal area.
Really?
And then, yeah. And then there's, but you can't really tell what it is. You can't tell that it's like a chemical dumping site or anything.
No, yeah.
And then there's a couple streets, I think like 2 streets that have been like they're overgrown, and
I imagine the state of New York didn't put up a sign that was like, "This is the Love Canal."
yeah, we fucked up.
Yeah.
But there are a handful of homes that people did not want to leave. It was not many, but there were a couple homes that when the state said that they would buy people out of their homes and they would have to leave, people refused. And so there's a couple homes that are still standing, like right in that area that the state has actually said it cannot be like resettled. And
It's like inhabitable.
those homes have been sold. I just read an article today that these homes are selling. There's, I think, 4 homes in the past 2 years that are straight up in sight where the state says you cannot live here. It's not, or you shouldn't live here. It's not safe. And
what the fuck is that realtor doing?
so a couple of them signed, they had to like sign some piece of paper that said they wanted to buy them, but they bought these homes for like $40,000 because nobody, which is dramatically less than anything,
Yeah.
farther out.
But
And
at risk.
I know, right? I think that the people just didn't know how bad it was. I mean, who knows what that disclosure paper looked like, But there was also a guy who is renting his house who did not have to sign a disclosure and moved in, and he says that they have black goo seeping into their sump pump in their basement.
What?
Yeah.
In
and that he can smell
2025?
chemicals. Yes, in 2024.
Oh.
Yeah. Like, you couldn't pay me. And not even that, but driving around there is so eerie.
Is it like
And
desolate?
just across the street. So it was basically the canal, the streets ran, most of the streets where the people were evacuated ran like parallel to the canal.
Mm-hmm.
And the school was sat right on top of the canal, like directly on top of it, right in the middle. And then like most of the residential streets that we're talking about were just like parallel streets to that. But on the ends of either end of the canal, there are homes right there. Right
that
there.
They're saying or what? Fine.
Yeah, that they, there was like the first row of houses they evacuated, but now they're resettled. I drove past the area and there's like a park, there's like baseball diamonds, there's a playground, there's
So again,
like an
kids are
old
playing.
folks home that's within the area. It's very chilling to be over there and think about like how hard people had to fight to get out of that area.
And now it's being populated.
Yeah. Yeah, and imagine being Luella Penny, who still lives there. I mean, she doesn't live in that area, but she's
like native to the region.
Yeah, that last paragraph that I read she described that exact scene in the documentary that I watched.
Of the pregnant mom and her baby.
Yeah, seeing a pregnant woman and her toddler just walking down the street, having no idea probably of what happened there.
100% reassure me that you're far enough away where this doesn't affect you?
Yeah, so luckily my husband is a nerd and is really into hydrology and has an environmental science degree.
Hell yeah,
so
James.
Hell yeah. But it's really crazy because just like a couple miles from me is a different site that was where it's called the Low site, the Lake Ontario Ordnance Waste, I don't know, something. And that is where they dumped the materials from the Manhattan Project. So there's like uranium in there and a whole bunch of stuff.
Talk about another toxic waste.
I know, we could do Oppenheimer next.
God, he would love that shit.
What?
He would love that.
I know.
That's
but
insane.
I know. But I'm far enough away. I'm like, we were talking, everyone in this was talking about like blocks away from the site. And I'm like miles and miles and miles away from this area.
When you drove there, how long was the drive? Like 10, 15 minutes?
For me to get to Love Canal?
Yeah.
Probably 10 to 15 minutes. But like,
so close. Like
Wegmans and stuff that I go to, it's a mile probably from Wegmans.
When
and
I
like
was
the gym that I work at.
Is that the one I went to?
Yeah, the Wegmans and when you went to Walmart to get our podcasting equipment.
That fucking damn.
Yeah, you were like maybe not even a mile from Love Canal. I know. Isn't that crazy? Just right in your own backyard. And they say like, what was it? How many? 1,200 Superfund sites identified so far by the EPA.
But that's all over the United States.
Right, but like, think about how many of these sites, how many Love Canals are just sitting, waiting to be uncovered.
Like, what is that average per state? Because that's a lot.
I don't know. I'm bad at that.
1,200.
But.
And I mean, things are looking down for what people are going to be doing in the government for environment stuff.
I know,
it's all
right?
downhill from here.
Yeah, thank God. Thank God. You know, really feeling good about the government today. But
I know. I mean, we're recording on January 22nd, the day after the inauguration. Dear God. And this will probably be released in like 3 weeks, but our opinion stands. And our fear will stand.
Yeah, just roll back those environmental protections, baby.
Good job, Jen. I think you truly did justice to this story.
I hope so. I really, really wanted to like, there's so much more too. There are so many more details. If anyone is even remotely interested in this, the documentary that I watched was called Poisoned Ground, and it was on Amazon Prime, I believe. And it came out in 2024. It was like very compelling. If you're a documentary person, you absolutely should go watch this. And I mean, I know a lot of our listeners were people we went to school with in Buffalo or people that still live here.
Yeah.
It's just such a crazy story.
And we have, shout out in a good way, we have nerdy friends. They would appreciate this.
I know. Gotta love nerds.
Yeah,
nerds rule the world.
Fucking losing his shit over this.
I called Kate. So Kate grew up in the town that I live in. One of our friends grew up in the town that I live in. And I called her and I was like, you need to read this book. I actually read this book. I started reading over the summer and I just kind of re-listened to it for the podcast. But I called her and I dogged her. I was like, download this right now. There's so many things that are like, the school that John Allen went to is 1 minute down the road from me. Like, he didn't go to the 99th Street School. He just lived next to it. But that's not the school he attended because Luella Kenny and their family were very religious and they went to Catholic school. And so there's a private Catholic school that's legitimately 3 blocks away from me. And that's where John Allen went to school.
Going to that school, he just lived there.
Yeah, he didn't go to the 99th Street School. But he was close enough that
it affected him, obviously.
Yeah. And isn't that stat about Agent Orange insane?
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine what the people in Vietnam are dealing with?
More than Vietnam.
Yeah.
This tiny little community.
In one mile dump. More than everything that was dropped in the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. And James gets so mad at me when I say this, but like, I always am like, okay, so this is just like a grassy, basically now the bump looks like a grassy, like bump. Yeah. No, like there's like a clay cap over all of it. So it's just like a grassy bump now. Okay. And like, there's gotta be like deer that go and they eat the grass. And then the deer go and shit on someone else's front lawn.
Why does James get mad at you about this?
Because I go down a rabbit hole of like, I tell him, I'm like, okay, so the uranium, he's like, everything depends on the water table and the direction the water is going. And I am like, okay, so the uranium in the site, the water goes the other way. And he's like, yeah, we're fine. And I'm like, what about bioaccumulation? If a bunny that was fucking nibbling on some radioactive grass over there trots over to our yard and then shits in my yard, do I have uranium in my yard now? And I'm like, and then I'm going to plant some fucking carrots in my backyard, and now I have uranium carrots and feeding them to my kids. And he's like, you need a hobby.
This is the hobby, James.
So this is it. Going back to our first episode, our intro episode, where you were like, are we qualified for this? And I was like, actually, yes.
Yes, you especially, because again, like you said, you do Wikipedia holes, you fucking you nosedive into your research. You drove near the site.
Yeah, I toured it.
Accessibility, but still counts. So listen up, James.
So the next one, I mean, I know my next topic already. Do you?
Well, our next recording, yeah.
I'm excited.
So we hope that you like this.
Yay.
Thanks for tuning in.
Hell yeah, don't fuck with moms.
Don't fuck
with moms. If there's one takeaway, don't fuck with the environment and don't fuck with moms.
Peace.